Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the source material you trust and transform it into sharp, actionable knowledge. So if you're preparing for, a conceptual jump in your field, or maybe just catching up on core methodology, or even if you're just intensely curious about how scientific investigation is structured, well, this deep dive is for you. Today, we are focusing on that first, absolutely critical piece of any serious research project: the hypothesis. And this isn't just a guess, it's really the indispensable blueprint for all investigation.
That's the perfect word for it, a blueprint.
So our mission is to quickly grasp its conceptual depth, its functions, and why understanding the different forms it takes is so crucial for designing a successful study. We're drawing entirely from the foundational academic material you shared with us, so let's unpack this, starting right at the beginning. The word itself, hypo plus thesis.
It's the perfect place to start. It really is, because the etymology right away gives us two distinct but related ways to think about this. If we break it down the classic way, hypo basically translates to tentative.
Okay, tentative.
Or, something that's subject to verification. And thesis just means a statement about the solution to a problem.
So you put them together and
You get meaning number one: a hypothesis is a tentative statement about the solution of the problem. Something that you absolutely have to verify.
it's the big idea you're putting forward, saying, I think this is it.
Now I have to prove it.
Exactly. That's the big conceptual definition. But the source material also gives us a second meaning, a more practical one, an operational meaning.
Yes, and this is the one researchers really need for methodological rigor. Here, hypo means the composition of two or more variables that you're going to verify.
So how things are connected.
Right.
Yeah.
And thesis, in this context, means the position of those variables within a specific frame of reference.
So it's not just suggesting a relationship, it's defining the terms of that relationship.
Precisely. It forces you to define what you're measuring and how you're measuring it. So the hypothesis moves from just a tentative idea to a verifiable proposition about how things interact in the real world.
It really does sound like a big step, from just observing something to formally proposing a relationship you can test. And the source acknowledges that, calling it a leap into a dark.
I love that phrase.
Me too. And also a brilliant guess. It's like it's informed intuition, but it's still a guess.
It is a creative act, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that creativity has to be disciplined. And that's why you see so many different perspectives on what this brilliant guess actually is.
Yeah, the material synthesized a few. I mean, Grain Kishton called it a tentative supposition, just to explain an observation.
Right, which sounds very descriptive, very focused on what's already there.
But then you have someone like J.W. Best, who saw it as a shrewd guess, and he added that crucial part about it needing to guide the investigation.
That adds that active quality, that forward motion. It's not just a statement, it's a map.
And B.W. Tuckman pushes it toward outcomes, defining it as an expectation about events.
Forcing you to think about what you'll actually measure.
Exactly. And then finally, you have M. Verna, who kind of bridges theory and practice.
Verna's definition is great. It's basically a theory, but only once it's stated as a testable proposition and subjected to real empirical verification.
So a good hypothesis is a disciplined, testable idea that acts as a map for action.
Yes.
But to really get its unique role, we have to distinguish it from a couple of other things people mix it up with all the time: assumptions and postulates.
This is such a critical distinction. It's often the biggest sticking point, and it really dictates your whole starting point. Let's start with the easy one, the assumption.
Okay.
An assumption is just, well, you're taking something for granted to simplify the situation. You might assume study participants can read the survey. You aren't trying to prove it, you just need to accept it to move forward.
It's a precondition.
Exactly. Then you have the postulate. This is a much deeper concept. It's a working belief of scientific activity. Postulates are not proven.
And maybe can't be proven.
Right, maybe not with our current tools.
Yeah.
But they're accepted at face value, so you can build on top of them. You postulate that time flows linearly, so you can conduct your chemistry experiment. You aren't testing space-time itself.
So assumptions and postulates are the foundations you build on, which makes the hypothesis what?
The hypothesis is the point of friction. It's the presumptive statement of a proposition which the researcher seeks to prove.
Or disprove.
Or disprove. You don't accept it, you challenge it, you attack it with data, you build on postulates, you actively test the hypothesis.
That makes so much more sense. Okay, so now that we know what it is and what it isn't, let's talk about its fundamental nature. What are its core features?
Well, its nature really reflects its function as that intellectual pivot point you mentioned.
So first, it's conceptual. It's about ideas. But it has to be a verbal statement in declarative form. You can't just have a hunch.
No vague feelings allowed. And that statement has to indicate a tentative relationship between two or more variables. That word tentative is key.
Right. And it has a future or forward reference. It's all about what you plan to prove tomorrow, not what you found yesterday.
That forward direction is why the source calls it the pivot of a scientific research. Everything else, the whole research design, is built specifically to turn that pivot, to test that single proposition.
So beyond being the pivot, what are the practical functions? What does the blueprint actually do?
It does a few critical things. First, it offers that temporary solution, that starting line, just so the researcher can begin the work. Otherwise, you're just, collecting facts randomly, aimlessly. Second, it's generative. Testing one hypothesis, whether it succeeds or fails, often leads you right to the next one.
And it gives you that definite statement you can test objectively. You either accept it or you reject it. It takes the guesswork out of the conclusion.
Yeah, and we can really boil those functions down to three main jobs. One, it helps delimit the field of research. It sets manageable boundaries.
It stops you from trying to solve everything all at once.
Exactly. Two, it sensitizes the research to have a realistic approach. By forcing you to make it testable, it keeps you grounded in what's actually possible.
Okay, and three.
Three, it offers a simple means for collecting evidence. The hypothesis tells you exactly what kind of data you need to go find.
So what does all of this mean for you, the listener? Why is this so important?
Because it builds that essential bridge between the problem and the evidence that may solve the problem. A problem is just a question. Evidence is just facts. The hypothesis connects them.
It really is the map.
It's the map that guides and, crucially, expedites the investigation. Without it, you're just wandering in the dark.
And that guidance is incredibly practical. The source notes it dictates what subjects, tools, and instruments you'll need. A hypothesis about reading comprehension tells you need reading tests. It literally selects the tools for you.
And that goes all the way to the end of the project. It provides the framework for drawing conclusions. If it's verified, it contributes to theory. If it's not, you reformulate it. It's a continuous loop.
That loop brings us to the researcher's toolbox, because this blueprint comes in a few different shapes, right?
Yes, and researchers choose the form very intentionally based on their research design and what they're trying to do.
So first up is the question form hypothesis, just stating it as a question. But the source says there's no real consensus on this one.
Right. It's not really seen as rigorous enough for formal studies. It lacks that declarative precision you need for testing.
The more standard starting point is the declarative statement.
Yeah, that was straightforward. It just says there's an anticipated relationship or difference. Something like there's a relationship between hours of sleep and cognitive performance.
It makes a claim, but doesn't say which way it goes.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the two big ones that really shape the study: directional and non-directional. Let's start with directional.
The directional hypothesis is powerful because it connotes an expected direction. It tells a more complete story. It's a bolder claim.
Can you give us a quick example?
Sure. Let's use fertilizer in plants. A declarative statement is, fertilizer affects plant height. A directional hypothesis says, increased fertilizer will lead to increased plant height.
You're predicting a positive relationship.
You're predicting the sign of the relationship, yes.
And that brings us to the fourth, and maybe the most important one for statistical research, the non-directional hypothesis. Or, as it's almost always called,
The null hypothesis.
the null hypothesis. This one can be a little counterintuitive.
It really can be.
Yeah.
The null hypothesis is simply the assertion that no difference exists between the variables. So for our example, it would be, there is no significant difference in height between plants that got fertilizer and those that didn't.
So wait, with the null, you're not trying to prove your own theory. You're actually proposing the absence of an effect, so you can try to reject it.
That's it exactly. It all comes down to the principle of falsification. It is statistically so much easier and more rigorous to reject a statement of no difference than it is to prove a specific directional one.
So if you can show the relationship is almost certainly not zero.
You've rejected the null and you have evidence for your effect. It's the gold standard because it forces objectivity.
So that choice between a directional and a null hypothesis, that's a huge methodological decision. It defines the whole approach.
That's the entire point. The hypothesis isn't a placeholder. It commits you to a specific methodology all the way down to the stats you're going to run.
This has been a fantastic deep dive, moving from the simple meaning of the word all the way to that critical choice between the null and directional forms.
And to bring it all back home for you, the listener, a hypothesis isn't just a guess. It's a precisely articulated, testable proposition that acts as the necessary map and the intellectual pivot for all scientific research.
Yeah.
It turns that vague curiosity into verifiable action.
We said earlier that the hypothesis is unique because you have to prove or refute it, unlike a postulate, which is just an accepted working belief.
And that brings us to a final thought, based on what the methodologists Barr and Skates observed. They noted that once a hypothesis is fully established, it can become a fact, a principle, or even a theory.
So if the hypothesis is just a presumptive statement that's out there seeking proof, reflect on this. What foundational beliefs? Those ideas accepted as postulates in your own field of interest or your industry? What are they? Which accepted truths are just waiting for someone to turn them into a formal, testable hypothesis?
That's where the real work begins, turning accepted faith into measurable knowledge.
Until next time, keep digging.